Hello everyone, this is Jurimani here. Welcome to my YouTube channel Juri's World. Today I am going to explain you the chapter Weathering the Storm in Ersama. This is a real experience while the cyclone hit Orissa in October 1999. It killed thousands of people and devastated hundreds of villages. And for two dreadful nights, Prasant and a young man was mourned on the roof of a house. On the third day, he decided to go to his village. So, uh, this disaster killed thousands of people and devastated hundreds of villages. But amidst this devastating cyclone, there were people like Prasant who fought with this courageously and helped people to get rid of that mental, physical trauma and help to lead a normal life. On 27 October 1999, 7 years after his mother's death, Prasant had gone to the block headquarters of Ersama, a small town in the coastal Odisha, some 18 kilometers from his village, to spend a day with a friend. In the evening, a dark and mimicking storm quickly gathered. Winds beat against the houses with a speed and fury that Prasant had never witnessed before. Heavy and incessant rain filled the darkness. Ancient trees were uprooted and crushed to the earth. Screams rent the air as people and houses were swiftly washed away. The angry water whirled into his friend's house neck deep. The building was of brick and mortar and was strong enough to survive the devastation of the wind's velocity of 350 km per hour. But the cold terror of the family grew with the crashing of trees that had got uprooted and fallen on their house, sometime in the middle of the night, damaging its roof and walls. The crazed destruction rough by the cyclone and the surge of the ocean continued for the next 36 hours. Although wind speeds had reduced somewhat by the next morning, to escape the waters rising in the house, Prasant and his friend's family had taken refuge on the roof. Prasant will never forget the shock he experienced at his first glimpses of the devastation brought by the super cyclone in the grey light of the early morning. A raging, deadly brown sheet of water covered everything as far as the eye could see. Only fractured cement houses still stood in a few places. Bloated animals, carcasses, and human corpses floated in every direction. All around, even huge old trees had fallen. Two coconut trees had fallen on the roof of the house. This was blessing in disguise because the tender coconuts from the trees kept the trapped family from starving in the several days that followed. For the next 2 days, Prasant sat huddled with his friend's family in the open on the rooftops. They froze in the cold, incessant rain. The rainwater washed away Prasant's tears. The only thought of that flashed through his mind was whether his family had survived the fury of this super cyclone. Was he to be bereft once again? 2 days later, which seemed to Prasant like 2 years, the rain ceased and the rainwater slowly began to recede. Prasant was determined to seek out his family without further delay, but the situation was still dangerous, and his friend's family pleaded with Prasant to stay back a little while longer, but Prasant knew he had to go. He equipped himself with a long, sturdy stick and then started on his 18 kilometers expedition back to his village, though through the swollen floodwater. It was a journey he could never forget. He constantly had to use his stick to locate the road to determine whether the water was not shallow. At places it was waist deep, and progress was slow. At several points, he lost the road and had to swim. After some distance, he was relieved to find two friends of his uncle who were also returning to their village. They decided to move ahead together. So, the Prashant, the 19 years old boy who was faced this deadly storm in his friend's village, and the cyclone destroyed everything, houses, men, animals, and for 2 dreadful days and nights, Prasant was on the rooftops along with his friends' family. But on the third day, he decided to seek out his own family, though the situation was still dangerous with water everywhere. Eventually, Prasant reached his village. He equipped himself with long sturdy stick and started on his 18-kilometer expedition back to his village through the swollen floodwater. It was an unforgettable journey actually. Constantly he used to stick to the locate the road to determine where the water was most shallow. At places it was waist deep and progress was slow. At several points he lost the road and had to swim. On the way he went to met two friends of his uncle. Finally Prasant reached his village and found his family safe in a Red Cross shelter. So their families were in Red Cross shelter, and his village Kalikuda, he find that there once stood, they were only remnant of its roof. Some of their belongings were caught, mingled, and twisted in the branches of trees just visible above the dark waters. And young Prasan decided to go to the Red Cross shelter to look for his family. Among the first people he saw in the crowd was his maternal grandmother, weak with hunger. She rose to him, her hands outstretched, her eyes brimming. It was a miracle. They had long given him up to death for dead. Quickly word spread, and his extended family gathered around him and hugged him tight in relief. Prasant anxiously scanned the mortally bared group. His brother and sister, his uncles and aunts, they all seems to be there. By the next morning, as he took in the desperate situation in the shelter, he decided to get a grip over himself. He sensed a deathly grief settling upon the 2,500 strong crowd in the shelter. 86 lives were lost in the village. All the 96 houses had been washed away. It was their fourth day at the shelter. So far, they had survived on green coconuts, but there were too few to go around such a tumult of people. Prasan, all of the all of 19 years, decided to step in as leader of his village. If no one else did, he organized a group of youths and elders to jointly pressurize the merchant once again to part with his rice. This time, the delegation succeeded and returned triumphantly, wading through the receding waters with food for the entire shelter. No one cared that the rice was already rotting. Branches from fallen trees were gathered to light a reluctant and slow fire on which to cook the rice. For the first time in 4 days, the survivors at the cyclone shelter were able to fill their bellies. His next task was to organize a team of youth volunteers to clean the shelter of filth, urine, vomit, and floating carcasses, to tend to the wounds and fractures of the many who had been injured. On the fifth day, a military helicopter flew over the shelter and dropped some food parcels. It then did not return. The youth asked for force gathered empty utensils from the shelter. Then they deputed the children to lie in the sand left by the water around the shelter with these utensils on their stomachs. The, to communicate to the passing helicopters that they were hungry. The message got through, and after that, the helicopter made regular rounds of the shelters, airdropping food and other basic needs. Person found that a large number of children had been orphaned. He brought them together and put up a polythene sheet shelter for them. Women were mobilized to look after them, while the men secured food and materials for the shelter. As the week passed, Prasant was quick to organize that the women and children were sinking deeper and deeper in their grief. He persuaded the women to start working in the Food for Work program started by the NGO. And for the children, he organized sports events. He himself loved to play cricket, and so he organized cricket matches for children. Prasant engaged with other volunteers in helping the widows and children to pick up the broken pieces of their lives. The initial government plan was to set up institutions for orphans and widows. However, this step was successfully resisted as it was felt that in such institutions children would go up without love and widows would suffer from stigma and loneliness. Prasant's group believed orphans could be resettled in their own community itself, possibly in new foster families made up of children's childless widows and children without adult care. It is 6 months after the devastation of the super cyclone. This time Prasant's wounded spirit had healed simply because he had no time to bother about his own pain. His handsome, youthful face is what the widows and orphan children of his village seek out most in their darkest hour of grief. Hers Mandir. So, uh, eventually, Prasant reached his village and his heart felt cold when he saw the remnant of his house. He found his family along with other villagers in Red Cross shelters. He forgot of his grief when he could see the desperate condition of these 2,500 people in the shelter. He stood up as the leader. He motivated people for self-help. Actually, men and youth worked on arranging food and shelter, and while women took care of cooking and looking after orphan and injured. The need of the hour was to fulfill physical as well as mental needs of the people in crisis. So, Prasad managed and motivated his village folks to fulfill those needs. So, this is a real experience actually that Pit Orissa in October 1999. It is on 27th October. So, the weathering the storm in Ersama by Mandar. Mandar is an Indian social activist and writer actually. Uh, he came into prominence after 2002 Gujarat riots and heads. Aman Bidari, whose work Communal Harmony, and he has written a collection of essays titled Unheard Voices, The Stories of Forgotten Lives 2001, and Fear and Forgiveness The Aftermath of Massacre, 2009. He writes and speaks regularly on issues of social justice, rights to information, disability rights, communal harmony, tribal, Dalits, etc. And his other major books include The Reap Says, The Public Policy and Poor in India. So I think you have understood the chapter Weathering the Storms in Ersama, the real account of a cyclone, super cyclone that hit Orissa. If you like my video, do like, share and subscribe. Thank you.